Okay. We're ready. Okay, so I don't actually have any of those types of measuring cups, but that's okay because we have a jar here which has some on it. And I've got these. And we've got all of our supplies here to start. Really, the basic things you need is just a jar. I forgot to grab a lid, of course I did. A jar, flour, and water. So a lot of times our faucet water is not the greatest water. So I either will boil this or just keep water out for 24 hours or just buy bottled water, whatever. It doesn't have to be super complicated, just as long as you got water and flour and a jar, you are good to go. You know, there's lots of tools and equipment and stuff that I've now acquired, but they're not necessary, and a lot of the stuff can make it seem more complicated than it is. So are they helpful? Yes. Are they absolutely necessary? No. You know, people have been doing sourdough for a long time, before a lot of this stuff was even coming up with yet. So here we go. We've got all of our basic supplies. So on day one, which is today, we're gonna take our flour. I probably already have a scoop in there, but pull this out. And this is just from Sam's Club, $13 for this big bag. You know, the kids, they go through, especially in school, a lot of bread. So a lot of the goal was to save costs. So whatever you have, I've used all different types of flour. So I'm actually like kind of not even measuring. So we're just gonna put some flour in. Remember, it doesn't have to be very complicated. So, alright, we've got flour in there. Like, pretty good amount. Alright, so we're up to this first line. Now, if you do have a scale, which I do, you know, it's more accurate to measure. But I found the scale to help me more later on when I'm actually making the bread. Then it just kind of makes it more work and more of a mess, and I struggle with making messes. So, and I don't want to always be cleaning up messes. So I found if we can do this a little more simple and take out steps of using more things than we need to, that helps me not feel as overwhelmed by the process. So now, oh, this is just a funnel from my canning set, but anything, sometimes I don't even use it. It just helps keep you from making a mess. So we'll just add some water, like that. Take this out, and use the back of the spoon, mix it up, and let's see what we got. Yeah, it's a good consistency. So the most important thing is you're looking for the consistency more than anything else. And in the beginning, I've also used whole wheat flour. Whole wheat flour helps to get everything going pretty good. So this is what we're about at in terms of consistency. Just, you're looking for it to be pretty thick, because it's going to sit there and maybe we're on the hair of too thick. No, that's good. So that's the most important thing. So, you know, if you read a recipe or a blog or something and it's telling you this much water to this much this, once you get familiar with, you know, your kitchen, your environment and stuff, in the first 7 days, you don't want to use too much because you're not able to consume it until like day 10. Again, that's going to depend on your factors. Our house is about 75, 76 degrees. So that's it for day 1. That's all you're doing. Now, I gotta go get a lid, but we're going to put a lid on it, and that's it. Leave it alone. And tomorrow morning, we'll come back and we'll add a little bit more without getting rid of anything. And it can even be like even smaller than that, as long as you're getting the consistency. And if you don't want to go through as much flour, you know, because like for us, the point is I can't spend $6 on a loaf of bread when we go through, you know. Anyway, so that's day one. That's it. Leave it alone. And then, so here's my Susie dough maker, my little baby. I keep putting her in the fridge thinking like, okay, I'm not going to use it, and then I get excited and I pull her back out and use her anyway. But in the beginning, I was, you know, saving a lot of discard. This is my discard jar that I use for pancakes and English muffins and whatever else. You can see this liquid here. I'm gonna open it. This one stays in the fridge. And once we get to like day 4 or 5, when we start discarding, we'll talk more about the discard. But this one sits in the fridge, and it's got that liquid forming on top. That's called hooch. If you don't want, we don't like our bread very sour, so I usually pour it before I mix it all up. And that just stays when I discard. But now I'm implementing a no discard. But again, that's for later on down the line. Tomorrow morning we'll come and add a little bit more flour, a little bit more water, recover it up. By day 2 or 3, you could be feeding one time in the morning, one time in the afternoon. But again, we'll get to that. Most important thing is, you know, using what you have, not getting intimidated by the technical jargon, and just trusting your instincts and going with the flow and adjusting things to what you have and where you're at, and going from there. That's it. We'll do day 2 tomorrow, and we'll get them going, and we'll be making bread before we know it. Alright, so now once we get our starter going, which for me, when I started, like I said, I made a notebook, and then I've got also like a quicker cheat sheet of different things I had tried. And again, some of the things can sound pretty complicated, but a basic recipe is just starter, flour, water, and salt. And getting to a point of being able to just feel comfortable and confident to see, like this hasn't been fed yet, so I'm going to feed it now. Just to, this has been in the fridge. So, this has been in the fridge, but not for very long. You can see it's very, very bubbly still, even though, and pretty thick. I move it around, so it's still pretty active. And I've gotten to a point where instead of discarding, I can take a small amount of this jar, feed it in the morning, and then have it ready to go because our house is warm. Oh, I'm supposed to be feeding it. Alright. So, I'm not gonna, you know, everyone tell you like, discard, like there's lots of fancy terms. It doesn't have to be like that. So we'll just do the same thing we did when we're starting it. We're just gonna add some water. And since there's a lot in here, we want to make sure that it's enough water and flour so that way all of it can become fed. I baked 2 loaves yesterday from it, and then I got it in the fridge by the afternoon. I fed it in the morning. Was able to pull some from it. Well, let me see how much flour it was. Alright, yeah, so this process is basically just getting comfortable and familiar with. And then again, you just take your spoon, get it in there, mix it around. using the back of the spoon. I don't know why, but most people, you know, don't use metal. A silicone spatula from the Dollar Tree. Anything that's long enough and big enough and easy to clean, because this stuff is so thick you don't want to pour it down the drain. Alright, that's looking good. Maybe it could probably use maybe even a little more flour, but you're just looking for a consistency that's like, and you want to make sure it's all that flour is incorporated, but you just want to make sure. That's the main thing, just making sure it's nice and thick. And because the house is so warm, I don't really need to like do any of the fancy stuff like put it in the oven or anything like that. Sometimes my house is even a little too warm, that instead of this taking, you know, maybe 4 to 6 hours, it can be growing up pretty much till in like 2 hours. And the humidity, I know you guys down there might have more humidity, so you might have to experiment with using less water. And maybe just I take a paper towel or whatever to wipe the back of this off. And that's it. So now this one goes to sit, and leave that. Now if I wanted to make like English muffins or even bagels or buns or garlic knots or something like that, I could just take this without even having to feed it and wait for it to grow. The rubber band on here is important. This jar came from Dollar General, but these ones are like from thrift stores, whatever you can get. I think this was $5 at Dollar General, and you know, produce rubber band. It's good because it'll mark where your dough is starting from, and then you can watch it. It'll go up. Now that it's been fed, it'll start going up. It's still cold from being in the refrigerator, so today it might take a little longer than it normally does. But now you just watch it, and by watching it day after day after day, you start to learn like what point it reaches before it starts going back down. The hooch on this and the fact that it's been in the fridge indicate that it's hungry, like it's already gone through the process of rising to its peak. You'll start to notice where the peak is, and you'll just get to know it. Like I said, in the beginning I was using whole wheat flour every once in a while, which you can see in this one. But it definitely did affect the flavor. You can use rye flour, all-purpose. Like there's so many. You can whatever you have, whatever kind of flour you have is fine. You can use potato flakes, like whatever you have, whatever your bud. Like you can do this with the things you have. In terms of like equipment, like the fancy equipment, you know, I do have a whisk. I didn't have it the whole time. I do have a whisk. Is it helpful? Yes. Necessary? No. The specific bowls, that I have noticed a difference using it, but I've also just used regular bowls, and they were just as good. And baking vessels, again, same thing. I do have a Dutch oven, so most of the time I cook it in the Dutch oven. But I found this clay pot, which I experimented with yesterday, and it made a nice like almost like a sandwichy type loaf. So I baked them in a regular bread pan. That clay pan came from a thrift store. Where is it? My Pyrex sandwich thing came from a thrift store for like $1. That one was like $5. You know, it doesn't have to be expensive. especially since, you know, a lot of the goal is to try new things and save some money on some budgeting for food. So that's it. It really is very simple. We're just going to keep repeating that process until we get it to a point of stability, because in the beginning, you know, a lot of the when it's first trying to establish itself, a lot of it's going to be bad bacterias that can hurt your belly. It's not like, you know, you'll whatever. We're just trying to get it to a point. And even I've noticed a difference, like, yes, you can bake after day 10 or so, a loaf of bread, but even mine, which is now, let's think, I don't know, probably about 3-4 months old, I'm only just noticing a consistency, and I'm still playing around with like baking it in different things, baking it on a cookie sheet, doing different recipes with it, so forth. So I've definitely not perfected it by any means, but I'm realizing like it really just comes down to adjusting for your own personal environment. So that's it. I hope I didn't get too ahead of ourselves, and that it was helpful. But use what you have. Start small. I've tried sourdough starters in years past, and I've given up just out of like not knowing that it's really not as complicated. You really got to work hard to mess it up. So grace for yourself, grace for the process, patience, and being okay with maybe not a perfect loaf of bread at first, but then the next one will be better, and keeping notes of what's working, what's not working. I should have taken some pictures of my bad loaves, which I think one I threw out to the squirrels and they didn't even eat it. So there's going to be bad loaves, but there's going to be decent loaves, and there's going to be good loaves. And the good thing about a bad loaf is you know what not to do. So grace and compassion on yourself, understanding there's a learning curve, and that I will share whatever knowledge I've gained, and there are a lot of supportive beginners groups, lots of good YouTube videos on processes. Maybe watch you know, a few different ones to see how I like to do that sometimes, especially for a recipe too. I like to kind of pick out pieces of information and adapt them to my situation to make them a little easier. So looking at 3 or 4 different methods and either experimenting with them or taking pieces of each one and adjusting that way has been really helpful for me with my kind of like, you know, mom scatterbrain ADHD. I got cut off, but that's the basic process, and it's a long process, but it's not one that is as overwhelming as I once thought, and it can easily be scheduled around everything else. It's not something that has to be, this is something completely individual and can be done within your schedule, around your kids' schedules. It doesn't have to be something that's like overwhelming. So that's what I've got so far. I'll try to come up with more clear, like actual written instructions, but that's my best advice based off like my experiences. So I will be here for the process and to answer any questions. I will take pictures of mine on each day and make a better notebook too, so that way I can create clearer instructions, not be so jumbly. But I'm proud of you. I'm glad that you are wanting to, you know, same as us, get out of the rut of everything the same and everything whatever, and with little kids wanting them to try different stuff, but like not like I don't want to go to the store and buy something that I'm not even sure if they're gonna eat or, you know, like, or, and I can play around with this so that way everybody has something. Like Elias can have biscuits, Nate can have bagels, I can have bagels, Yanni can have muffins, Nina can have waffles. I'll show you the freezer waffles when we get to there. I don't have to buy Eggo waffles anymore. You know, some of them are having a harder time with, I don't want it, I want Eggos. Whereas others are more willing to try. But yeah, we'll get there. I'm here with you, and I'm still learning too, and I'm here to be an encouragement and to answer and help in any way I can. And yeah, that's everything. So we're gonna be in this together now. That's it.